I don't think Magic 30 should have been printed, just in general. And I think it was a mistake on their part. If you bought Secret Layers, that's you kind of like contributed to Magic 30, to be honest. I've seen board game stores that reluctantly sell singles, and I've gone to one in Vegas. I've gone to play there, and I'm asking for singles. They're like, "Nope, we can't sell you any singles before the start of an event." Why? We don't have staff. I only want 4 cards. Yeah, no, and they refuse to sell you singles.
All right, so I am here with Grim, who is the owner of a local game store. I've seen a lot of discussion going around, in particular, about the Magic 30th anniversary product. For the first part of the interview, I'm going to be going over with Grim mostly topics related to running a business and sales and stuff. And then in the second part, we'll get into Magic specifically and things specifically related to that game. Quick disclaimer, this video is not being sponsored by Grim or his store, but I have worked for him in the past, so just clearing that up. So, Grim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going? I'm Graham. I'm the owner-operator for Collector Legion in Lawndale, California.
All right, and how long have you been in business?
Well, we opened our doors in May 2016, but that's not when we started. We started dabbling on online sales, I'm sure like most other stores started, and that was in early 2015. So we did that for about a year before we got to the point that we were able to open a physical location.
And so, why did you want to run or open a game store? Because I know you also have a construction business, so why did you want to open a second business doing something completely different?
It started by accident, to be honest. When we started Collector Legion, we were big time into a lot of the collectibles, whether it's card games, board games, and collectible figures like Marvel Legends and Hot Toys. So when we met up maybe 20 years ago, we had that bond back then. And, through our entire friendship, it spawned, through the music scene. So we were friends for a long time in the music scene. And shortly after me not playing music anymore, we tried to figure out something that, we could also do that was not just a regular job. Because, our 9 to 5 is, what pays the bills, but it's not something that sparks, passion and makes us happy in life. So we figured that we both enjoy the same hobby. So let's, see if we could start a side business doing that. It started selling toys online and selling card games online. And we didn't really think that we would open a physical location, the first day that we started selling online. We just thought it would be, something cool that we can do. We turned our music studio into a little hangout spot. So we actually bought 16 chairs. We had 4 tables there. We would habitually have friends come over to help us open product at the time, and we even held some drafts at our old music space. It wasn't available for the public. It was just like friends just meeting up and hanging out. And when the business started rolling and getting a lot more traction and getting to the point where it just made no sense to really be paying for a music studio, and we needed to have access to like retail products that just weren't acquired through the second market. We figured that getting a brick and mortar location was just the next thing we had to do. So we looked for something that wasn't too big, something that was within our range, and we found a location in Gardena, California. And that's where we were at for 5 years.
And then more recently, you moved to a new place.
Yeah, we moved to a 5,300 square foot location in Lawndale, California. But when we started the game store, it wasn't, hey, I want a place to play at right now. It was, just friends looking to, expand on their hobbies and hanging out together. And it just kind of grew into like a game store that, it wasn't expected to be what it is now.
So, first question is, how do the sales of Magic compare to the sales of other similar games like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Flesh and Blood, Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons, etc.?
It kind of overtakes every other game. And it was something that I noticed right when I opened the doors. Online, everything's kind of even. If you put up Yu-Gi-Oh product, you're gonna sell Yu-Gi-Oh product. TCG Player is one of the easiest places to sell your singles at, eBay as well. So when we would put up figures, we would move the figures. When we put any kind of singles from any game, it wouldn't move. But as soon as we opened our physical location, we started noticing we had a higher influx of traffic, and majority of it was MTG players. Currently, our store is 55% Magic sales, and that is one of the main reasons that we're open. We're without a doubt a huge Magic store. While when you walk into our store, you don't just think, "Hey, this is a Magic store." We have a huge variety of products. We have anything from tabletop games, board games, Warhammer, huge variety of sleeves, and other TCGs. But our back end just shows that Magic is the main thing keeping the doors open, and any big store that does Magic singles and sealed is gonna probably attest to the same thing, that if it wasn't for Magic, they wouldn't have seen the growth that they've seen over the last years.
And what is your analysis of why that is? Why do you think Magic overtakes the other games? Is that something that is true in general or just specifically for your store?
I've seen other stores. I've seen Pokemon only stores that have, that dove heavily into Pokemon very early on do well. And, even for us, our Pokemon sales are about 21% of our gross sales, which is, a little bit under half of what Magic is, but still the only contender for big TCG at the store is Pokemon. During the big Pokemon boom, they were head to head. We were selling just as much Pokemon, even more so than Magic. But the reason I feel like Pokemon didn't overtake is that we have a huge inventory of Magic. We have a big 1,200 square foot back room, and we have singles dating back from Alpha. And even though our collection isn't that big for like the older stuff, we do have a lot of reserve list stuff, and we just don't have the inventory for Pokemon as we do for Magic. But the reason I do feel like Magic is as big as it is, it is one of the longer lasting card games. It currently has the most formats, so more different ways to play the game than any of the current games right now. With Pokemon, you have just standards, the primary format to play. And yeah, there are other formats, but that is just the main one that stores play. Same with Yu-Gi-Oh, even though Yu-Gi-Oh does have some older formats like Edison and GOAT, but Advance is the most popular format. So primarily every single game has like the main format that if you go on a Tuesday, Wednesday night and I'm here for Pokemon, I'm here for Yu-Gi-Oh, you're mainly playing one format. While Magic has a huge list of formats. You can find Pauper events, you can find Pioneer events. The list goes on, and because you have such a huge variety, it caters to literally any player base. You have your hyper competitive players that will be playing their modern, their standard if you need to play it. Your Pioneer, any format that qualifies you for any of these high end events. But then you also have like more casual competitive events. Like I can't call Commander casual because they do have a very competitive format, and a lot of those players are very hardcore into it. But you have, kitchen tabletop Magic as well. So because you have such a wide diversity for Magic, it makes it easier to just come in and hang out and play those games.
And specifically relating to the sales of those games, which is more profitable, selling singles or selling sealed product?
Sealed is not where the profit margins are at. Most people are paying like $85, $90 a boxes, and you're selling them for $100, $115. You're only selling for 15, 20% margins at most. And while some other games like, board games have a double markup, right? You're buying at half and you're selling at 100%. So you're making 50% margins. The problem with that is that you're not selling the volume that you would with like the main card games. For Pokemon and Magic, the big profit makers are going to be your single sales. And while they do make the most amount of money, it becomes a hassle trying to acquire, these singles, since you are dealing with a second hand market, and that leads to either you having to go out and buy online, whether it's Facebook groups or in person. But you have to be very aggressive in regards to acquiring these products, since they are what makes you the most money.
And can you speak to exactly what is the profit margin on singles?
Singles vary, and it's mainly because of the trade-in aspect, right? You have a card that is for $10. Somebody will trade in another card that is $6 towards it, but they're trading it at half value, right? So they're trading in three of these $5 cards for a $10 card. So you right there, you've made a future sale of net gains of $5 right there, and you probably acquired that $10 card for $5 as well. So it's one of these things where you're constantly trading with singles, which is not the traditional retail thing that most stores are accustomed to. A lot of the big box stores don't like that because you do open yourself up to like a lot of errors, whether it's an employee buying in at the wrong price, buying cards that just spiked, overpaying for cards, or buying cards that are about to get reprinted, and due to lack of knowledge, they're overpaying on them, and then they dropped 70% in value within the next month or so. So there is a lot more risk when it comes to dealing with singles, but the reward is a lot higher.
So just to briefly recap a little bit of what you said there. So the big box stores that sell card game products like Target, for example, they can't, or at least won't, get into the singles market because they don't want to have to train employees to be up to date on the market and know how to buy and sell and stuff.
That's correct. And even some of the local game stores, they usually gravitate towards being a tabletop store or a Warhammer, wargaming store over a single store, just because they don't want to deal with it. And everybody has these stories of having employee theft, and that is one of the huge downside to it, is that you have to have a lot of trust in your employees and have a really good system for tracking your inventory. $100 card takes up a very small space and can be easily misplaced or lost during digitizing, or during that entire transaction of somebody buying in, trading in, and replacing the inventory that was just sold. So you will have issues with theft if you don't have a good system to input your inventory quicker.
Speaking about singles in a broader sense, what are the differences in buying and selling singles between the various card games?
Some of the non-Magic and non-Pokemon card games, you're not really paying in as much, just because they just don't move as quickly. And while some players expect a little bit more just because their cards are, more valuable, it's you pay according to how quickly it sells, unfortunately. And sometimes a $5 card, you're not paying $5 on it. You're paying $2, $3, $1 for $100 card in like Yu-Gi-Oh. That's a huge collector's item. You're not paying your 70-80% that you would for like a dual land, because it's a niche item that's only going to sell on TCG Player, and you're going to lose out 20% already selling on TCG Player. So you're probably paying like 50%, 40%. So and then it also really depends on your community too. I mean, you could be a big Yu-Gi-Oh store, so you're buying it at 70% because you just have the community there for it, and you're willing to be the one that's absorbing all the singles in your local area, just because you have an outlet for it. It just depends on what your community looks like in store, and it really varies per store.
What is better for selling singles? Is it better to open sealed product for them, or is it better to buy them from customers?
It depends what stage you're at in your business. When I first started, the main thing I did was open product, mainly because I didn't have any singles. My selections were very very limited. Even now, when new sets come out, I still do open singles, but not in the quantities that I opened before. Mainly, I want to open up enough to fill up like a 3 or 5K, depending on the game, because there are some commons and uncommons that I do need that just go into shelves for a lot of games. But you're not looking to like build your inventory up from cracking singles. It truly does depend on the set, though. Most standard releases, you just kind of want just playable cards, and then you're just having an aggressive buy list. You're buying at a higher rate for any of the cards that you feel could potentially go up, or just potentially be staples in other decks, and you're gonna buy in as many as you can. And that's pretty much how you're gonna want to do it later in. There is nothing wrong with opening sealed product, as long as you do the homework and make sure that the EV makes sense for that box. Some boxes are just atrocious. You're opening it up, you spend $100, and you're making $50 for that box. Some boxes, like the old Modern Masters, were just pure value. You're opening up the box and you're doubling your money, easy. So it depends on the box. You have to just do your homework before you dive into anything.
How do card game accessories compare? So like things like sleeves, deck boxes, play mats.
Card game and accessories have a huge profit margin, but they're not bought up as much as singles. So you do want them in your store. And the main thing I noticed that helped our store out was having a huge diversity of them. We didn't just have Dragon Shield, even though Dragon Shield is my favorite sleeve of choice. You have your Ultra Pros, your KMCs, etc. You want to have variety, and not just variety of brands, but variety of colors. Some people like the matte sleeves, which is like the huge majority of players. Some people don't. Some people like anime sleeves. Some people like the art sleeves. Some people just like regular black sleeves, purple, whatever color. You want to have a huge diversity. You want to have, if you have gondolas or shelves, you want to have 2, 3 gondolas full of just accessories and deck boxes and play mats, because that's what your players express themselves with. You have some players that go all pink everything. I want pink sleeves with my pink deck box and my pink playmat. Some people just go, I want black, or it's very random. You don't know what your clientele wants. They express themselves through their accessories. It's like shoelaces on your shoes. So you want to have a variety, and it helps your store as well too. The margins on them are really good. You just want to have you don't want to dive too heavy into them where you're overspending on accessories and not buying anything else, but you do want to have a great variety for them, and it's going to help you out in the long term.
And what about other products? Because I know you've spoken in the past specifically about things like board games and figures.
For us, board games just look cool, and I love board games. I have a board game group. We meet up every couple of weeks and we play our games, and it's super fun. But the downside to board games is that it's $50 box for 4 players, and that's kind of it. Financially speaking, it's not great for the business. And as a matter of fact, I think my tabletop sales are only 1.4% of my gross sales overall. So while if you walk into my store, 75% of my retail space is comprised of tabletop games. It's less than 2% of my gross sales. It's still not nothing. It still makes good money. You still do want it, and 2% may seem like a little bit, but still the dollar amount is still pretty great for us to still carry. To continue carrying board games. It's just that everything else is just much bigger, which facilitates us having just a diverse, inventory catalog. It's different times of the year to drive up sales. Right now, it's the holiday season, so we are going to see more tabletop games start, being sought after as stocking stuffers, as like quick gifts for people. But at least for us in our demographic, board games aren't the big seller that you would expect it to be.
And I know you've spoken specifically about how it's hard to compete with big box stores and online retailers in regards to board games.
Yes. So one of the issues that I had early on was, and I'm sure you'll recall, you'll walk into the store, we would have F&M, and then we had a wall in the back with like our Marvel Legends, our Hot Toys, and figure arts. If you know anything about Marvel Legends, they go for about 24 bucks. Every new set that comes out, it's like 8 figures. The problem with that is that stores like Target will get too many and hot sale them, and then they're going for $12.99, in store. While $12.99 is, a really good price, the problem with that is that for most, game stores or more collectible stores, we're buying them from one distributor, and our price is about $15, $16. So you're getting a set in, and sometimes the set before you even get it, Target will sometimes get them the week before, and they're already fire selling it at a loss. And I don't think that Target's paying. There's no way Target pays what we pay, obviously, because they're a huge store. So they're probably paying, a fraction of that. $7 figures probably, because they're buying tens of thousands of these while we're buying a handful of cases. But we got to the point where it was just impossible to compete. We look like the bad guys trying to sell it at $24.99. If Target's doing $20, if we did $20, we're making $2-3, per figure. And then if you start selling them online, after shipping and eBay fees and everything, you're only making $1 or $2 per per figure. And while I am passionate about my collectibles, it's just really hard to keep the doors open with those type of margins. And eventually there's just some stuff where it's like, if it's your passion, it's your dream, and it is for a lot of people, it's just really hard to, you have to be flexible. You just have to let some stuff go. You can't be married to an idea of, carrying certain things. If it hurts your store, you have to move on from it and just move on to something else, or just carry a small amount and not just be focused on that. One of the reasons that we have tabletop games, but we have a small, it's a small footprint of what the store, does. So we don't dive too heavily into it. We mainly focus on the things that do keep the doors open.
And you've spoken specifically about how the store used to carry figures and it no longer does.
Yes.
So, and why was that exactly?
That same exact reason. It got to the point where we just couldn't compete with, Target and Toys R Us at the time. And when Toys R Us closed down, we thought, hey, this is a good time for us. It sucks that Toys R Us closed down, but maybe now will be the place that people would want to come and get their figures at. And nothing changed. Just Target just doubled down. Target has an impressive collection of toys, and you even have people still going there, getting their pops there, everything there, even board games, which is one of the reasons that it's so hard to compete with that. Anything that you could get at a big box store, it's really hard to have a smaller game store trying to do the same when they have their doorbusters and they're selling it at cost. Many times in the Facebook groups that I'm in, it's like game store retailers would just say, hey, there's a D&D book out. It's less than cost. They're selling at a Target. I suggest going in and buying a handful of them to restock the shelves, so when the sale's over, you can just sell them for MSRP. I don't really do that, but there have been some times in the past where, like, when figures would be like $12, I go there, buy the figures, we put them in the back room. When they go back to normal, we sell them. But you're doing all this work to make $6, and it became a hassle. I rather focus on something that, like, it's big stores can't compete with, which is singles, right? You're not going in to Target and saying, hey, I want a shadowless Charizard. They just don't have it. You're going to collectible stores for that. And that's one of the things that kind of set us aside. We have, you name the card, we'll have it. And if we can't and we don't have it, we'll get it for you. And that's a lot easier to compete with than having to worry about, like, Target just, outselling you for less than what you're paying for.
How many years did you sell figures before you decided to stop?
It was about, let's see, 2015 we started online. We opened 2016. Physically, I think by 2019. So we were open for 3 years, but we had been doing business for 4. So by 2019, it just became impossible to not just make money, but we would just have too much dead inventory.
So why do you think it took so long, so 4 years of selling an unprofitable product, to figure out that you should not be selling it?
Stubbornness. That's honestly what it is, and a lot of other store owners would attest the same. We tend to do a lot of stuff because we're passionate about it. We're like, no, but we like this. This is my dream. This is my store. This is why I opened it. This is what I want to do. So you're gonna try. You're not gonna stop the first time it fails. And for the most part, that is a good, attribute to have. Sometimes you'll do something and it fails. Like we did Pokemon early on. It failed in the beginning and then it boomed and we caught the wave on time and we made a lot of money. So, early on when we did figures, it wasn't working for us, but we kept at it. We were thinking, no, we'll get past this wave. Then, like I mentioned before, Toys R Us closed down and we thought, okay, maybe now's the time. And it's just every quarter we just saw that it just wasn't doing well. We were accruing too much, dead inventory that just wasn't moving, and investing too much money where it was affecting, operations, because we were, buying cases, not being able to sell it. And, early on for stores, you don't really have this huge reserve to be able to just, spend and catch up on releases. You're kind of like, you buy a release, you want to move most of it so you have money for the next release. And our stubbornness to, like, try and make figures work hurt us a lot early on, because we weren't as liquid as we had wanted to be. But after a lot of analysis, we just we figured it was just time to let it go. We tried our best. It didn't work, and we had to walk away from it. Luckily, Magic and other card games were doing great, so it was easy to just keep moving forward. But it is a bummer that we no longer carry a lot of these cool figures anymore.
And last question on the on store sales of products. How do other non-gaming related products sell? Things like snacks, merchandise, clothing, etc.
Snacks, merch are great, but you don't want to dive too heavy on it. Uh, when you have a big enough play space, you're gonna be selling snacks, but you just have to deal with the fact that people will just come in with food, and you can't get mad over it. But if as long as you have good selection of drinks, sodas and waters, your margins are ridiculous for water and for drinks in general. So it's easy to keep that going as long as you're constantly moving it, and having a good strong player base helps with that.
Speaking of, because you mentioned people coming in with their own food, how would you recommend game stores handle some things like that, where either customers bring in their own stuff, or you just have people who show up and they play in tournaments, but they never actually buy anything?
You can't take it personal. I've been to stores myself as a player, and they have a no outside food policy, and I respect it. I go inside, and then their snack selection is just terrible. And I end up walking outside, going to get a slice of pizza from their neighbor, and just eating it outside, then walking back inside. You have to be realistic with your restriction. If you're not gonna allow outdoor snacks, have a better snack selection. Not something that's just not all sugary candy. Half chips, half if you can, protein bars or almonds or trail mix. Is you just have to be reasonable. And I know it sucks, if somebody comes in with like a 2 liter bottle of soda and cups, and they're just giving it to their friends, but your snacks and drinks aren't what's keeping your doors open. So you shouldn't worry that much about it. And it's usually just a handful of players that are doing this anyway, so it doesn't matter.
All right, so moving on to another topic. So we've previously talked about how you can't really compete with the big box stores and online retailers in regards to board games and figures and such. What are some other types of product that smaller game stores really just cannot compete with the big stores on?
A lot of them are just sealed boxes. I've seen sealed boxes being sold online for almost cost. I mean, even now we see the Amazon dumping sealed product, and I'm seeing collector boxes for less than cost being sold online, and it's kind of disheartening sometimes when you're seeing it, and it's kind of hard to keep up with it. So, but you just keep moving forward. Order a little bit less of stuff that just doesn't sell well in your store, even if you want to carry it. But you can't be led by your heart. You have to be thoughtful and look at the numbers, make sure that they make sense, and you don't want to be stuck with product that you have to sell at a loss consistently. If you're consistently finding yourself offloading 50 boxes at a loss online, then you're making errors when making your pre-orders. You should be adjusting your numbers accordingly. You shouldn't have 3 waves of sets where you're selling at a loss. But it just seems like that's what stores are doing. They'll overbuy, and then they'll just sell at a loss because they just feel like they have to be constantly buying certain things when it's there's no issues with cutting down your allocation on product.
Going slightly off topic, I wanted to get your perspective because we're talking a lot about sales margins and what you buy in and sell for. So, Wizards stopped listing the MSRP for their products. We've heard a lot of speculation from the community on why that is. Oh, they want to hide the cost so that when these products that are either printed too short of supply or that have any other factor that goes into them that raises their price above what was supposed to be the market price, that players will blame the game stores. What, in your opinion, is the reason why they got rid of MSRP, and what have been the effects of that?
Getting rid of MSRP makes it harder for game stores because you don't have a number or a solid number across the board that you can follow. For Flesh and Blood, they have an MSRP, and you can't deviate more than 20% from it, right? So there is still that range. Same for Games Workshop. You can't deviate within 15% of MSRP. Your costs are set, and your margins are the same for everybody. You can make the more or less, if you're willing to, give them the full discount or not. But with Wizards doing that, it makes it hard because, the cost of products went up, everything went up by like $5. The days of buying boxes for 60, $70 cost are long gone. You're paying 85, 90, or $95 for a draft or set box. And if you're paying $95 for a set box and you're selling it for $100, $104.99, it's the margins just aren't there. You're making $10 a box. And if you have 4 employees or even 2 employees, it's how many boxes would you have to sell? If you're paying them $15 an hour for 8 hours, it's $120 per employee per day. If you have 2 guys on shift, it's $240 for your 2 employees. That means you have to sell 24 boxes. And that doesn't sound that difficult, but selling 24 boxes a day every single day just doesn't happen. You're gonna see a huge sales the weekend it comes out, and then you're selling a box here and there. So it's really hard to keep, to operate only on sealed product alone, and it's very difficult when there is no MSRP. And I feel like stores would be doing a lot better if we would just adhere to like a number that we all have to stick to, or it can't deviate more than 10 or 15% from it. But then I feel like customers just wouldn't buy them at that point either. I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's really hard to figure out something that just makes sense, and it's not a choice that the store owners really had. It's something that we were just kind of like put in this situation, and we have to deal with it.
Well, in your opinion, what is the benefit to Wizards for not having an MSRP?
I'm assuming so they could charge more to the distributors. I'm not too sure. It's I don't know why. It would be better if they did, but a lot of decisions, like I want to say that I know why, but a lot of the decisions, as much as I love Magic, a lot of the decisions that Wizards has made me scratch my head and go, why are they doing? It just doesn't feel like the decisions are being made by people that know the game or are passionate about the game.
So you're not accusing them of like making decisions only for financial motivation. You're saying you literally just don't understand the thinking behind them.
I have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. It feels like somebody just got put in charge, and then that person was like, "Oh, Wizards, what do you guys do? Oh, Magic cards, all right." And then they're just like treating it like any other business without really like knowing what they're moving, what they're selling. I don't know what the history that the people in charge have with Magic, but I don't. Based on the decisions that they've made, I assume it's none.
Okay, so getting back onto the topic of smaller local game stores versus the big box stores and online retailers, why do you think players should buy from a local game store as opposed to a big box store or an online retailer?
The easiest answer is just buy where you play. Sometimes some stores are ridiculous with their pricing, and it hurts to say, but just if they have something that's overpriced and you can find it on Amazon, buy it on Amazon. But for the most part, most stores are adjusting. They're selling at a competitive rate. Their singles are competitive. Their board games, you can't be that much more than Target. I mean, and even if it's like 5% more, it's not too bad. But the main thing is just buy where you play. I mean, a lot of stores are, rely on all the players that come play there. That's why we're open. We're there to make friends. We're there to meet other people. So my main thing is, as long as they're not abusive in regards to their pricing, as long as they're pricing accordingly and pricing fair, then just help them out. Not just us. I mean, help out just your local game store in general. Like a lot of these stores went through a lot during COVID, and some weren't as fortunate as others, and they're still trying to make ends meet. So take care of them so that you have a place to play at, with your friends. Because a lot of people see no problem spending $20 to go to the movies. So spend $10 buying sleeves and maybe a single or two and hanging out, where you're gonna hang out for like 4 or 5 hours on a Friday night. Because odds are you're coming around a lot more often than just once a week.
All right. So moving on, what have been the effects of the direct-to-consumer products, things like Secret Lairs from Wizards, on local game stores?
So I have mixed emotions about Secret Lairs and the direct-to-consumer products. As a player, I love them. I think it's great. I get to see some cool arts for a lot of my cards. We had a Fortnite battle bus that replaced my smuggler's copter in my vintage cube, and it's ridiculous, and I love it. As a store, I hate it. It's why weren't these from the vaults? it sucks for the stores that have the singles and you're printing singles and selling them to, to your customer base, and driving down the price of singles sometimes as you're making reprints. I wear different hats when I talk about this subject, right? From the store aspect, it kind of sucks. It feels like Magic does, or Wizards doesn't really care about stores, because these should have been made accessible for us to order. But I do understand the point, the reason for it, because there are some stores like us. We would turn around and just resell them to everybody. While there are stores that have been known to crack promos and keep them to themselves and sell them on the second market, there are stores that would just probably keep 80% of these. I do appreciate the fact that they're pretty, on board with their, $29.99 for non-foil, $39.99 for foil, regardless of what the EV is on Secret Lairs. At least that part's cool. If they were constantly adjusting their pricing based on what they're printing, then it would be terrible. But at the very least, it's just like they have a pretty blanket. This is the prices for non-foils. This is the prices for foils, and sometimes it's value, sometimes it's not. The player part of me loves them though. I think they're great. I love having variety. It's just mixed emotions. You're gonna get one or the other. It sucks for stores, but it's great for Magic as a whole.
When you say it sucks for stores, what do you mean by that? Like in regards to the financial impact on stores?
Yeah, it's mainly that, because it's a slippery slope, right? If which is what happened with Magic 30, and I'm sure we're gonna get into that eventually. It's like we started Secret Lairs, right? And people loved it. Then it escalated into like, hey, we're printing fetches at Secret Lairs. Cool. Those were a little bit pricier, so people were a little bit unhappy over it. But they weren't really that pricey. They just, they were whatever cost was. We have even more and more singles being printed, and it led to, Magic 30 reprint, of beta, the whole beta set. It just feels like if you bought Secret Lairs, that's you kind of like contributed to Magic 30, to be honest. But it sucks for stores, just because it's the majority of stores that are doing well and staying open are can't compete with sealed product. The reason that, like I said before, you walk into my store and you want a Charizard, I got you. But all of a sudden you have Pokemon's not doing it, but Magic goes, hey, you want a Lumog? I got you. And now they're buying from them instead of you, which makes it a lot harder to keep the doors open when you can't compete with sealed product. Your tabletop games can't really compete, and then the one thing that that your store does well, now they're competing with you in it. It makes it tough. That's the sucky part about it.
Okay. So, yeah, speaking of, Magic 30th is the next topic I wanted to talk about. And in fact, that was the big motivating reason I wanted to do this interview in the first place. Before we go on, I should explain what the Magic 30th anniversary is, just for anyone who doesn't know. So Magic 30th anniversary is a set that Wizards released that's basically, it's a pseudo reprint of the original set of the game, with reprints of all of the most expensive chase rares in the game. But all of the cards are proxies. They're all they have different borders and are not legal to play in competitive tournaments. But the product is being priced at $1,000 for 4 randomized packs. So I've seen a lot of hot takes on the Magic 30th anniversary product. Pretty big controversy, a lot of drama surrounding it. It's been so controversial, in fact, that I'm even seeing people outside the game weighing in. So like, Asmongold did a video on Magic 30th, and he's a World of Warcraft streamer. Nothing to do with Magic. So I see a lot of opinions on it, but I don't see a lot of them from the perspective of game stores or the financial aspect of it. I see most of the opinions I see are people, players, mostly just complaining about how expensive it is. So can you give me your take on 30th anniversary in all its aspects?
So on the reprints alone, Secret Lairs affects the stores because they have singles, right? Just from the face value of what you're getting. Them reprinting Moxes and like a Black Lotus doesn't affect the average store in regards to like their singles inventory, because most of us don't have power. I mean, some stores do, but I can tell you the majority of stores don't have power. So the fact that they reprinted it, it gives a lot of stores the ability to get a set of Power 9 when they would have never had this opportunity. And I'm sure like most players, had it not been for the price point, would have been exhilarated to be able to get it. And that's where I found the irony. It's $1,000 for 4 packs is ridiculous, and it's a ridiculous price point. I don't think Magic 30 should have been printed, just in general. And that's what I was, before I continue the conversation, I think it was a mistake on their part. They got overzealous. They saw how well Secret Lairs was doing over the last couple of years, and they're like, hey, they love reprints. Let's, find a loophole as to how to reprint, reserve list cards. And they did. They shouldn't have. Now it brings a lot of collectors, second guessing whether they should be holding on to like older stock now, and it makes it, you kind of lose faith in in their business model, because you just don't know what they're going to do next. They just did this, so you wonder what's coming next, right? But had it not been for the $1,000 price point, I would have seen these flown off the shelf. If these would have been $250 boxes instead of packs, $300 for 4 packs, they probably would have sold out. And everybody that's complaining, if they would have had access to these for $200, $300 for the 4 pack, they would have bought it. I mean, people complain about the VIP packs. Do you remember those came out and they were like $100 for a pack?
Yeah, for it was Double Masters VIP, right?
Double Masters VIP, they sold out. The first Double Masters sold out, and they're just going up. And it was what, $100 a pack? We have the same thing right now with almost essentially the same, the Double Masters Collector's Editions, where every pack is like 70 something. People are still buying them up, right? So it's majority people that have an issue with it. Their tunes will change the moment the price margin changes. Like, I still think that even at $100 for this box, I wouldn't buy it. It shouldn't have been reprinted in the first place. Sure, it's cool to have, you could finally get your Power 9 set, and a lot of people would have been excited to get it. But I mean, there's still proxies at the end of the day. You can't play them for Eternal Weekend. I mean, just in old school. But if you're playing them for old school, most of the time, they'll let you play with proxies anyways. In Commander, even though it's, quote unquote, not, you shouldn't be playing with proxies. We hold 70, 80 player Commander nights, and we allow proxies to be played at the store. Most store owners don't care about proxies anyways, but like, who cares? Power 9 proxies aren't going into Commander sets. So they didn't print this for them. They printed this for collectors. They printed this to try and make money. And I think it was just an error, just like 100% of the way.
So whenever one of these premium products from Wizards gets printed, like Double Masters and those other type of sets, Modern Horizons, any of the Master sets really, I see complaining from people saying it's too expensive. And I understand. So it has kind of two negative effects for the player base in this regard. First is, if you are interested in drafting the set, if drafts cost $40, well, how many can you even afford that? Maybe you can play one draft and then you're not going to draft again. And then the second part is, if you're hoping that cards that you're looking to buy get reprinted and thus their price goes down, if the products are this expensive, how much of an effect does it really have on prices? So those are the two big areas where I see legitimacy to complaining about them. But the fact that the product is being reprinted at all, some people are still going to buy it, and it will affect prices to some degree. So it's, in that regard at least, a positive. 30th anniversary in particular is particularly egregious in how expensive it is. But in terms of what the product is doing, I don't really care. The cards are all proxies. They realistically shouldn't have any effect on the prices of all the original duels and power and whatnot. I think the thing that gets me about it, and that got some other people about it, is the idea that we've wanted the reserve list abolished so that we could see reprints of dual lands and whatnot. I think specifically for like legacy and vintage players in particular. But the fact that the product is this expensive, even while being proxies, shows that if they ever were to break the reserve list and reprint those cards, they would never reprint them at an affordable price, that they would reprint them at secondary market prices.
Yeah, you're basically priced out before you even came out. And that's pretty sad.
All right, any other thoughts on 30th before we move on?
Like I said, my only takeaway is that 90% of people that are complaining about it wouldn't be complaining about it if it was a $200 product. Let's be real. I'm still going to complain about it. I just think it should have been printed, but that's just me.
All right, so let's move on to specifically in-store play and tournaments. So first, what is the value of shops running tournaments? Are tournaments profitable?
It depends what stores you go to. So some stores, they charge a seating fee. So you'll pay $10 for your tournament. You'll have 20 players. They'll collect $200. They price back $100. If that's what keeps them in business, and if their community is okay with it, that's great. The bigger stores that I've seen run big events and have great sales and have continued to grow don't do that. They price out 100%. Whether it's us or any other big stores in SoCal that I could name, even some in Arizona and up the entire West Coast, they don't do sitting fee. They collect $200. They price out to $100. Is it profitable? It depends on how you look at it. Is it profitable to make $200 over 5 hours and have employees there, catering to a tournament that's basically paying out $40 an hour? Probably not. But now, is there long-term EV by catering to your community and you're taking care of your players, and eventually each player is gonna generate a couple $1,000s in sales? Then that's where the real profit is. Your profits aren't in the now. Your profits, it's future EV, right? It's if you take care of your community, like I said, your community is going to take care of you. If you're worried about making money right now from events, odds are those same players are just not going to care about taking care of you, and you'll be their second spot to buy stuff at because they know that you don't care.
So just to recap, basically it's that the tournament itself isn't profitable, but the fact that you're getting players engaged in your store is, because they're going to buy other things from you that are.
That's correct, yeah. You're not looking to break, you're looking to break even with these events, and for the most part it's at a loss, like I said, because you're still paying your employees to run these events. So if you price back 100% of what you collected, you're at a loss because you're paying your employees, but you're hoping that you have sales throughout this entire time, right? If you're open from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. and you have zero sales, and the only value of staying open just to run the event, it sucks on the short term. If you have sales throughout the entire span of the event, then that's a positive. But you're basically, this is for future EV, future growth. You don't. It's not about making that money back right now. It's about making that money back in the future.
Does the equation change at all between casual and competitive tournaments? So something like a casual F&M where you're charging like $5 or $10 and you have, 8 to 16 players in the store, versus more competitive events like regional championship qualifiers where you're charging $35 and you get, 60 plus people in the store?
Your reasons change for events. For your casual events, those are your locals, right? You charge $5, $10, and you take care of your community. And if you're not making a profit margin there, that's fine, because these people will continue to come to your store over the next handful of years. So, like I said, for that's future year. But for competitive tournaments like RCQs, for us, we're a premium store, so that means we could host 2 events in the quarter. The reason, now you could also keep some of the entry back, since that is a big day. If you're charging $35 and you're having 32 players come in, you collected $1,100. I've seen some stores only pay out half of that, and I'm sure most of those players would be happy taking $500 into the price pool, and that's fine. I've seen other people just price out $1,000. I think that the days for competitive tournaments, it's less about trying to make money from the seating fee. And I think that's the days that you want to be buying in collections, announcing that you're buying in, hoping to get some good trade-ins from different players, and maybe also spotlighting your store. You may have competitive players that come to your store that just didn't know that you were around, and they are not super close, but close enough to make it to locals. And that's one of the reasons that you want to be a little bit generous on your competitive tournaments, because there are stores that keep half of the profits still, and people reluctantly go to those stores for their RCQs, and they'll only show up that once or twice every 3 months. While if you are a little bit more generous and just give back 80-90%, maybe keep operations, right? Keep money for your judge that's going to be running your event, and price out $900. You're breaking even at that point, since you're taking pay for your judge from the entry fee. But it's like you need the I consider it an advertisement cost. I'm not looking to make money from these events. I'm honestly not looking to make money from any events, to be honest. Like if I was, I'd be, I don't know, I'd be in a different position in life, I think, and the store would be in a different place for sure if I was so worried about maximizing profits from my events. And I think that's one of the reasons that we grew to the point that we did, is because we always give 100% back, and a lot of the stores that do well give 100% back. So I think that's where any big store is gonna eventually be at. You're giving back 100%.
Speaking of, I've seen the reverse, where I've been to a number of tournaments where these are high-level competitive tournaments that have high entry fees. They have $35-$40 entry fees, and they paid back literally nothing in the prize pool. Where the prizing is the promos that they get for running the event, and then the first place winner of the event gets the invitation to the regional championship. What is your opinion on that?
I think that they don't deserve to be hosting RCQs, but they will continue to be hosting RCQs. Their community's gonna basically speak for itself. Stores that don't care about their community and do stuff like this, and like price back ampersand promos that you get for free because you're a premium store, and they get away with it because Wizards can't police you and tell you for every dollar collected you have to give back this, right? Like with pre-release, you charge X, you give them a kit, and then they give you product for pricing. They don't do that for RCQs. I'm not sure if legally they can tell you what to do or what margins you should be giving back.
So I've asked other players about that, and what they've said to me is that it becomes a legal issue involved in gambling, where if you're taking in money, that Wizards doesn't want to have a fixed prize out determined, because then it gets into whether the game would fall under gambling laws.
Yeah, I don't know how true or not that is, but bad stores give out 0%. And I've seen several bad stores do it, and their business is gonna feel it. I know, I'm friends with a lot, like over the last 7 years, I've made a lot of friendships with different stores, and we're all pretty transparent with, this is how much we're making, how we did this quarter. And, I've talked to a lot of stores that have done the 0%, and they're making a fraction of what the stores that give out 100%. And there's a reason for that. If you have a 62 player, RCQ, and you collect over, $2,000, and you don't prize anything back, guess what? These players aren't gonna come to you. You're not gonna be the place where these guys come to sell you their singles or collections to. They're gonna go elsewhere. Even your locals will reluctantly go there, just because that's just the place that they will go to. And then you'll be complaining, oh well, why do they like going to X store over coming to here? Well, it's because you don't treat them well. Like, you treat them poorly because they don't have another choice. And then when another store that opens up closer to you does better, by the community, all of a sudden you're not firing FNMs, and that's why.
All right. So moving on to the next question. I've seen you do giveaways and raffles, and this is something I really wanted to get insight on, because to me, I don't understand the reasoning behind doing these. So for example, you'll have free commander nights where there is no table fee and there's no actual tournament being run. You're not collecting fees from anybody, but you'll do raffles where you'll give away real staple cards. Like I've seen you give away Demonic Tutor, Monovault, etc., and you do this every single week. So what is the benefit of doing these?
The reason that I do that is because I remember at our old location, I don't want to throw around numbers, but we're making 5 times more than what we were at our old spot. And it's, we had, steady growth over the years. Then it kind of just exploded, and we were doing amazing. And it has a lot to do with, the community's been taking care of us 100%. But it's also, I'm very active in my community. I'm constantly playing in my events. I hang out with, everybody that's there. I'm always in the play area hanging out. This is just my way to give back. Like I said before, events are about 2% gross of my gross sales. So what's giving away $100, a week, or $200 a week? It's nothing in the grand scheme of sales. And it's a way for me to give back to the community, since they've been taking care of us for so long. And the other side to that is that we fill up the room. Like I said, we have 70 players for Commander, 80 players for Commander. On a week where there is no releases, Tuesday night is our biggest nights. We have the most sales that night. We have people buying Commander lists. We have, I have 4 people on staff, and it feels like that's not enough because they're just constantly pulling lists, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's like it's a free giveaway night too, and I'm not giving away that much. I'm not charging for them to be there, but it's helped with the growth. So us giving something away has in turn helped us out a lot more, and that's the takeaway I've gotten from it. And I'm going to continue to do these free giveaways till forever.
All right, moving on to more specifically talking about Magic. So I wanted to discuss the different formats from the perspective of a game store owner, because again, as a player, I hear the perspective of players and content creators, but not from game store owners. So beginning with Standard, for the longest time, Standard was the flagship format of the game. I mean, you could argue that Commander has always been bigger, but at least in terms of competitive tournaments, Standard was the flagship product. But right now, I don't see Standard firing hardly anywhere. I mean, I'm sure there are stores that fire Standard or even have the majority of their player base in Standard, but it seems like it's declined significantly, especially recently. We even saw on Twitter Aaron Forsyth talking about how Standard has declined. So in your opinion, why is Standard no longer popular?
Standard's no longer popular because of Arena, and that's just flat out what it is.
So it's nothing to do with organized play. It's Arena.
No, it's just Arena. It's just why would you invest into quickly rotating format when you could just get your itch scratched online, and coming to play 3 rounds or 4 rounds of Standard when you could just knock out 8-10 rounds, 8 to 10 matches online for Standard, which is the same. It just makes sense to just play on Arena. Standard, I love Standard. Standard was fun. Before Arena came out, I would go to the store. It'd be 2 p.m. and I'd have buddies already there play testing Standard, right? Because there was no place else to play test it. They didn't want to invest into Moto, so they're just in store, just play testing for the PPTQs that were coming up that weekend, right? And I'm talking about Monday through Friday. Like there'd be at least like a couple players just hanging out the store, just play testing and having an improv Standard tournament basically at the store. We would have Monday night we'd have Modern, and a lot of the guys would just test their Standard decks beforehand, then they played Modern. We would have Tuesday night EDH, and same thing. You'd have people playing Standard. You'd have people playing Standard at the rate that they're playing EDH right now, which is any given night of the week, there's somebody playing EDH at the store. That's what Standard was before Arena. And then as soon as Arena came down, it's like you saw it slowly going down, because it got to the point where it's like, oh, if I get to Mythic really quickly, I'm getting value matches, on Arena. So I'm going to prep there. We saw our buddy that went to the Pro Tour, they were testing Jeskai Angels, and they went 7-2 was their constructor record with that Standard deck, which was a great record. I think their draft was the only reason they didn't top 8. But you're getting valuable testing on Arena, and you're able to draft. So it kind of made it pointless to kind of try and build a Standard deck in person. And then once COVID happened and we were all closed down for 2 years or a year and change, then like too many sets came out where it was just impossible to just like catch up to it. So people just gravitated to EDH. And while RCQ seasons were trying to come up and grow Standard again, we started seeing shops do RCQs with like 8, 12, 11 players, 9-player RCQs for Standard. So even RCQs couldn't get it to come back. And it's just, Arena it's not Arena's fault. It's a great resource for practice, but it kind of made it difficult to get a huge community playing Standard again. But, we have the biggest EDH scene in Magic ever, right? EDH is exploded, and you have EDH everywhere, which is great.
Talking about Arena's effect on Standard, has it done the same for Limited? So like drafting?
Drafting kind of like dwindled as well. Back when we opened, we would have 2 players. We drafted twice a week. And I'm sure you remember that. We would draft, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and then we draft Fridays. And we would have maybe 2 pods on the middle of the week, and for F&M, we'd have 1 to 3 pods we can't seem to fire drafts now. And it was because back then people were drafting because, the Pro Tour back then was 3 rounds of draft leading into construct, always. So people back then said, we have to practice draft because it's a skill set that you need to work on because it's a Pro Tour format. And you're getting cards for standard, right? Back then drafting mattered more because a lot of these cards that are not really valuable outside of standard, you're kind of either value drafting cards that you need, drafting, formats that you like or archetypes that you like. And, it goes hand in hand with standard. So when there's less people playing standard, the people that really liked draft, would try and get to their drafts going in paper. But once all the standard players just stopped drafting as well, then the drafters also migrated towards Arena and just got their drafting done there.
Did the effect of collector boosters on secondary market prices of singles have any effect on drafts? Because one theory I've always had is that it's hard to justify spending, $12, $15 on drafts if the collector boosters are sort of like bifurcating the prices, where you have all of the expensive cards are in the mythic rares and maybe 1 or 2 rares, and then all of the other cards aren't.
Collector boosters, I guess it depends on the set.
I guess, is my premise even correct in the first place? Have collector boosters caused a bifurcation in the market?
I don't think collector boosters have affected like those formats in any sort of way. It has affected box sales, because why would you buy a draft box when you could just buy a collector if you're looking for value or you're looking for a set? So you're just, draft sets themselves are selling at a much slower rate because you're not drafting in general, and then you're not buying it. You're buying the more expensive stuff for value. So you're just buying set boxes now. I think if anything, set boxes is the thing that killed off draft boxes and drafting in general.
So moving on to Legacy, what I hear a lot is that, Legacy is dead. And I don't know to what degree that's a meme or if it is actually applicable to some degree. So what is your opinion on that? Is Legacy dead? If yes, what is your definition of the format being dead?
Legacy is definitely not dead, but it does need some work to not die. We have a strong Legacy crowd, and a lot of different stores that I've gone to have a Legacy community. I wish that they were more closer to EDH in regards to their acceptance of proxies. But then that just means that you're not running Legacy as at a sanctioned level event, right? It's just a casual event. You're not running it through Event Link, and if you did, you're just not reporting it through Event Link. Otherwise, you're reporting an unsanctioned event, which is something you shouldn't do. If Legacy started accepting the use of proxies for their events, we would have more players that would be interested in playing playing that format, because the format's super fun, but it's really difficult when it's $2,000-$3,000 worth of duels are keeping you away from playing this format, right? And then there are other players that go, well, you can just play Burn. But no one wants to play Burn in Legacy. Like, even though it's cheaper than it is in like modern Burn, right? And sure, DNT has gotten a lot cheaper, but like nobody wants to play DNT. It's playing blue spells is more fun. Casting Force of Will is more fun. You do have a lot of people gatekeeping other players because they spent real money to play the game, and that's just poor attitude to have. At the end of the day, you want to have more players to play with, and I think if Legacy players and stores would just accept, the use of proxies, you would see like a growth in that community at least.
So do you think Legacy should adopt the same proxy policy as Vintage?
I think so. I mean, Vintage is basically just like a unsanctioned event, and I think that that's the way that Legacy is just gonna go to.
Yeah, in regards to a format being dead, I would say if I were to say that any format's dead, I mean, other than obviously like completely dead formats like Tiny Leaders, in terms of like the big ones that people know about, I would say Vintage is dead, if anything. I think I've only ever seen one store that was actually able to successfully run Vintage events.
Yeah, and they probably I think they only had like 12 players go, right? Yeah, it's Vintage is really difficult to get going. I've tried to start a Vintage community at the shop with proxies. It's the people that play Vintage just play it on Moto, and they just it's really hard to get it going. And it worries me with at least Legacy that it'll eventually get to that point where there's no point in playing Vintage, right? I think that's basically what it is. Vintage doesn't qualify you for anything. There's no Vintage RCQs. There's no Vintage GPs. Even when we had, when we had GPs, right? There's no Vintage GPs, so a lot of players just don't see the point to even worry about that format because it doesn't affect them in any sort of way. And if Legacy doesn't adapt, eventually when GPs do come back, we're not going to be seeing Legacy GPs either. There are no Legacy RCQs. So people no longer worry about Vintage because it doesn't qualify you for anything. And we never had Vintage GPs. We did have Legacy GPs prior to this. And the catch-22 is that we're not going to grow the Legacy scene unless we allow proxies to be used, just so people can step into the format. Because if somebody really loves Legacy, they'll eventually buy into the format, but you don't want them buying into a format that they're not going to love or that they're not going to be comfortable playing in that community. So I think locally, at least for like your weekly events, having unsanctioned Legacy events will definitely help keep that format alive.
Now, we've been speaking about how some barriers to entry for these formats, like specifically Legacy and Vintage, are the financial barrier. So Pauper is a format that specifically doesn't have that financial barrier for the most part. So, and I know Pauper has its, its player base of devotees, but I hardly ever see regular Pauper events in person. So why do you think it is that Pauper isn't more popular?
I think it's the same reason for Vintage. Like, it doesn't qualify you for anything. It is a fun format. I have my Pauper deck. I have every possible Pauper deck that you can ever play on Moto as well, and it's a super fun format. But a lot of players that don't play EDH, they're mostly competitive card. They play competitive formats, and unfortunately, unless it's like Modern or Pioneer, they're kind of just not playing it. You know. And I think one of the issues that we had even with this RCQ season, because you could say, well, Standard was an RCQ format, but yeah, because you have so many different options, right? Like today, you can go play at a Pioneer RCQ or a Standard RCQ. I'll go to the Pioneer one. I think it's the fact that you have the options. You'll choose whatever is easier. So it makes firing, any format that's not one of these, very difficult. And if you're gonna play if you're gonna play one of these formats, then why would you choose Pauper over Legacy over Pioneer or Modern?
So before moving on to Commander, just to briefly touch on the others, do you have any thoughts as a game store owner about Pioneer and Modern?
They're fun. I don't have it like I love all formats. I enjoy some more than others, right? Like I enjoy modern, I think the most. Um, I do enjoy my Pioneer, but I'll play it, whenever there's a big event. So it's not really something I'm like looking for a weekly for it. I'll play my weekly modern events, legacy events. I love Commander. And aside from those three, I do have decks for pretty much everything else, but I'm not looking, for places to play those events. But we cater to everybody that plays those.
All right, so moving on to Commander now. So I believe the consensus is that Commander is the most popular of the formats, and Wizards has specifically stated that they have data that backs that up. And just even looking around myself, I see that almost everyone has an EDH deck. It fills up shops way more than other formats, at least outside of like RCQ events. So we can pretty easily say that Commander is the most popular format, but does that translate to it being the most profitable format? Or our competitive one-on-one format still more profitable?
So you can say the competitive player may spend the most one time, right? Your modern player is probably going to spend, over $1,000 on their one deck, maybe get a second deck, and that is the short term. But long term, they're not really spending that much more money. Your EDH player that's making their $200-300 budget, sliver deck is gonna, it might make another tribal deck that's worth $100. And in smaller amounts, smaller increments, they're spending just as much as your competitive card game player. And you have these, this one player spending, long term as much as your competitive card game players times 10, because the Commander community is just bigger than any other competitive format community in general. So you have, 100 players spending $100-200 on a casual deck. That beats out just one player buying a dual land. And then you also have your commander players that buy duels, buy fetches. It's both. You have a wide range of players. You have the players that want to make the cool casual decks. You have the players that make competitive decks but use proxies, and then you have the players that like go all out and do masterpieces and expeditions for their commander decks. And I don't have the exact number. I know that my MTG singles are 33%, but I would say if I had to break it down, I would say 70% of my single sales are to commander players.
All right. So moving on to organized play. The first part of this will be on Arena. So I understand. Basically, I'm an extremely enfranchised player. I mean, I even have a whole channel devoted to Magic. So I'm about as enfranchised as you could get. And I don't play Arena anymore. I did when it first came out, but to me, the economy as a free-to-play player is just too cumbersome, I guess is the word I would choose, to continue. I even did a calculation at one point where I just wanted to think of not even keeping up with standard. If all I want to do is just draft on it, how much do I have to devote? And of course, Arena implements the same sort of mobile game mechanics that you see in all the other mobile games, where you have to log in and do daily quests that involve, cast 20 spells in a game that are X color, and then you'll get a certain amount of gold, and you can spend that gold on drafts. And I calculated at one point, I think it was something like, in order to play 3 premier drafts, I would have to go on and spend at least like 6 to 8 hours every single week on Arena just grinding dailies, and to be able to play 3 drafts in 3 months. And to me, it's far too cumbersome. What is your opinion on Arena as a digital platform to play on first, and then how its economy works?
As a player, I love Arena. I love the ease of access. I still play Arena, and I do see where you're coming from, because you do have those players. You have the players that want to try and make it as free to play as possible, and they'll do their dailies and try and keep it, as free as they can. But, if you're using Arena to test, if you're not using Moto, first of all, and you're using Arena to test, and you're trying to play whatever meta deck is doing well right now, if you didn't have a good collection of wild cards, you're gonna end up having to spend some gems. And if that involves you paying $100 or $50 to get them, I don't see an issue with it primarily. Like for me, at least, and a lot of other players don't see the issues, because for me, it's like if I want to test standard and I want to get value games, and I'm good enough to get to Mythic and do well with it. If I'm gonna pay $35 this weekend to play an RCQ, or if I'm gonna test for an RC, I want to test on Moto, and I don't want to have a 90% deck on Arena. I'll play whatever, card for card the best deck is on Arena, and I don't mind putting the $50, and I'm sure a lot of other people don't mind putting the $50, and there's nothing wrong with paying for it. But then if you have an issue with paying it, then testing in person just makes it a lot easier. And there's other avenues that you could go and play on. But I do appreciate how easy it is to jump in and get your games in on Arena.
So I want to make it clear that personally, my problem is not with paying for it. I've done things like I've seen streamers play through an entire game, and I've loved the game so much that I wanted to support the studio, and I've just bought the game anyway, even though I've already seen someone play all the way through it. So my issue is not with paying for it. I have a lot of issues with Arena, which goes beyond the scope of this interview, but the biggest one is the economy. I think it is too expensive. And I've seen a lot of other content creators like Saffron Olive from MTG Goldfish, for example, talking about if you are not even just as a content creator, but if you're someone who's trying to play Arena and keep up with set releases, just how incredibly expensive it is.
Yeah. It's very expensive, and unlike Moto, you can't sell your cards for ticks, and then eventually you could turn those ticks into actual money. Your money's kind of lost, right? Like investing in there is no such thing as investing in Arena, because it's a dead end investment. Aside from the fact that it's fun, some people are okay with it. Some people aren't. I'm okay with putting some money towards it, even though I know that long term it's just not the best, just because I want to be able to have the best deck at the time and be able to get solid practice in, because my goals are different at those times, right? If I'm trying to qualify for, an RC invite, and the only formats, the next 2 weeks are standard, is I will try and get as much standard play as I can get. But because we do have the options for other formats, I'm not really focused on playing standard as much. I'll just casually play it. Lately, I haven't felt the need to invest money into it because there's no need for it right now. So I've been drafting a bit. I've been playing whatever funky decks I like on Alchemy, and it's fun. But if you want to get real practice in, unfortunately, you do have to throw some money at it, which kind of sucks.
All right, so broadening the scope of the conversation, what is your opinion on organized play in general, the current state of tournaments and whatnot?
Currently, it's not great. I especially the RCQs right now. I feel like we should go back to the old days and have seasons. We should have a standard season. We have a modern season. I think, especially with RCQ2, right? RCQ2 is queuing us for RC San Diego, which is a standard format. Why did we have? Why isn't this entire block standard? I've seen people play limited, and it's great. Limited, modern, pioneer, but it kind of sucks that they just don't say, "Hey, this entire RCQ season is standard and limited. That's it." Because they're not really trying to, like, I guess, step on anybody's toes, right? You're trying to please everybody.
So just to explain this for people who might not know, basically right now in organized play and Magic, there are seasons, which is basically from what was the current season? It's from like September to December or something.
Yeah.
Where, three to 4 month blocks of time where there are tournaments running that queue you into the regional championship at the end of the season. And Magic has multiple formats, but whatever format the tournament that you're qualifying for is not required to be the format of the tournaments that you're playing to qualify for it. So, for example, as you said, I believe the regional championship that's going to be in San Diego is a standard event, but the events that qualify you for it don't have to be standard. So you can have tournaments running pioneer events that still qualify for a tournament that's a standard event.
Correct. I think that is the biggest mistake. And they're trying to appeal to everybody and tell everybody, hey, if your store is not a standard store, you can do modern. And, we're a big modern store. We had, I think our first RC, we had 100 players. And it was for Pioneer, not even modern. But we had 100 players. We filled up the entire store, and we could have done more, but we didn't want to have anybody uncomfortable there. But I've gone to other RCs where it's been standard and it's sub 16 players, and it has a lot to do with that, right? They're giving you way too many options, and options are great, but then it hurts those formats. Like, if we're supposed to have a standard RC, make it standard, and it'll help the stores too. Like, having standard season helps, would probably help even get drafts going, but they're trying to appeal to everybody, and it just kind of makes it difficult, because now it's like, talk about how hard it is to get into competitive formats when it's now a lot more expensive to have a viable pioneer deck, a viable modern deck, a viable standard deck, and then occasionally you're gonna have to play limited. It's too much, and it gets too expensive, because there's no way that you're gonna get adequate training on all four formats. If it was just your one constructed format and you're limited, it'd be a lot easier for us to see a lot more growth in those formats. But due to the variety, we're gonna see players just going back to what an old faithful and playing whatever pet decks that they have in those formats, and we're not gonna see any growth in general.
All right, so moving on from organized play, I wanted to get your opinion on the product release schedule that WotC's been under for a while. So I've seen charts online where players have gone and done research and shown things that I don't remember the exact figures, and I'll pull up the charts later after the show. We've basically seen something like, in the past 2 years, WotC has released more products than they did in the entire history of the game before that. Some crazy numbers like that. And I've seen a lot of
released the most products we've ever released in 1 year this year.
Yeah, so and I've seen a lot of, I don't know if it's like player fatigue, either with just burnout from keeping up with so many products, or if it's a financial problem because then you have so many more products to buy. So what is your, again, as a game store owner, what's your opinion on the increased amount of products being released, and also the increased amount of more expensive products like Horizon sets and whatnot?
Yeah. So the term wallet fatigue goes for store owners as well. I don't have an infinite, backup for releases, and I have been bombarded by releases, not just Magic, but we had One Piece releases, we had Pokemon releases, we have releases for every single game, right? And Magic's not helping. And at least with other games, you have, with Pokemon, you have your main set, and then you have, ETBs. You'll have some three pack packs. Maybe you'll have your little, theme decks, but that's kind of it. But with Magic, it's you have your draft sets, your gift bundles, your set boosters, your collectors, your jump starts that suck, right? It's not like the first jump start. These are jump starts. These are theme decks hidden as jump start boxes, which I overbought, and then I basically just cut them off to like a handful of cases now, and it's just too much product coming out at once. And yeah, we're a premium store, we're a big store, and we make a lot of money, but we do get to the point where we're just like overextending ourselves. It's like every release is just so much, and the players feel it as well. And we're not moving as much Magic as compared to how much we're spending on it. And it's Wizards is just like overdoing it. And then not just with like the releases that go through the stores, then they're also doing their secret layers and the direct to consumer products that affect the in-store sales, because it's like not only are we overbuying these sets that are being released with a shorter time window, but now they're interrupting our sales by also we're doing these bundles for these secret layers. So the players that would normally come to your store and buy these set boxes are experiencing wallet fatigue as well, and going, well, I have to choose one or the other. So I guess I'm going to buy the cool stuff that's online opposed to the stuff I could probably get later. So I'm sitting on it for months now, because now they have the option to get it later, which is, they're right. But Wizards is not making it easier for stores either. A lot of stores are just sitting on the bag, right? And waiting for, waiting for hopefully these products to accrue more value, and then players come back to it in excitement, or you end up seeing them just offloaded at cost or at a loss or break even on eBay and TCG Player, just so that they can afford the next upcoming set. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot more recently than I did before, just because it's too much product coming out at once.
I can also speak personally to this, that, like, for example, just recently, I was just thinking, like, oh, I wonder what spoilers have been released recently. And I went on Mythic Spoiler, and I found that there were previews from 3 or 4 different sets that I wasn't even aware had been shown, or even from sets that I wasn't aware were even sets that were being released that I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah, keeping up with Magic right now, it's very difficult. It's becoming a full-time job. Just it's sometimes, and then not just that, it's like also just putting away and cracking. Like, we go back to like opening product. Opening product is so much harder when you have regular cards, foil card, foil edge, extended art foil, and then you have the retro, retro frame to it. You have 7 different items for one card. So sorting and digitizing, putting away hasn't got it any easier too, because it's not like, all right, you have your regular and your foil. Now it's like also 5, 6, 7 different versions of a card opposed to your 2.
So let's count this up just to go with it. So, like, for many cards in a typical set release of Magic right now, so you'll have, let's count them up on our hands. You've got 1, the normal version of the card. 2, the foil version of that card. 3, you'll have the special version, the showcase, special treatment, different frame version. 4, you have the foil version of that. 5, you may have an additional promo, like, yeah, the etched foil or whatever, like, or borderless planeswalkers or whatever. So that could be a 5th version. You'll have your promo pack version of the card, which will be the version that you get as F&M promo packs that have the little planeswalker symbol stamped on them. And then you'll have the normal version of that and the foil version of that. So that's like 7 different versions. And then you'll have, for rares and maybe sometimes other cards, you'll have pre-release promos at the pre-release. So you'll have an 8th version. So you can have 7 to 10 different versions of a single card that you have to then sort and place in their appropriate box and make sure you have listed correctly on your inventory.
Yeah, it's a lot.
All right, so moving on to the next question. So I wanted to get a sense for all these new products are being released. Oh, it's expensive. But when you get down to it, the question you really want to get an answer to is: are more players entering the game, leaving the game, or is the player base staying roughly the same? And this doesn't necessarily apply just to Magic. It can be any of these games.
I've had a lot more new players coming in, and I wouldn't say leaving, as I would say migrating. Players are just switching formats. I've seen players that I recall 4 or 5 years ago being diehard standard players. They're now playing Pioneer and Modern, or they just went and they're just playing just Commander exclusively, right? I'm seeing Commander players I've never seen ever in my life just coming to the store now in the last year or two. I'm seeing, a huge growth in the community. It's just not where I guess most stores want it to be. Like there's no new standard players. There's no new casual limited players. You're not really getting a spur of the moment draft pot popping up. If you're fortunate enough to do that, to have that going on, that's great. We have, and I can't say that, we don't have drafts going on from lack of players. We have, like, at any given moment, I'm like, there's so many people at the store. They're just playing other formats. They're, getting their Modern in, or their Pioneer in, they're testing, or they're playing, Commander, or they're playing Flesh and Blood, or other card games. It's like instead of playing your Commander player doesn't play other competitive formats. And when they do play a constructed format, they're playing like Digimon or some other card game that's not Magic. So it's kind of weird. I do see a lot more crossover now than I ever did before. I've seen players playing 2-3 different card games that are in Magic, but still playing Magic at the same time. It's the community and Magic, and just tabletop gaming in general is it's growing nonstop. It's just not the way that we'd expect it to. That's just it.
I heard a lot of alarmism after 30th anniversary release that players were coming in into game stores and liquidating their entire collections. Is that your experience? Have you seen that happening recently?
Oh yeah, I had somebody come. I bought in a handful pieces of power. I bought in full CE power sets. You have players that are just, it's the sky's falling, and what was it? It's a CE set of power. If it's complete, it's going for like 11 to 14 grand, depending on condition, depending if it's sealed or not, and just liquidating it because they're scared that their investment's gonna lose half its value, and that's just not the case. Yeah, we have seen a drop in like reserve list stuff by 10, 15, 20%, but it's nothing crazy. It just, everything goes up in waves, goes up and down. We saw a huge boom initially because of COVID. A lot of stuff that shouldn't happen, price where it's at, got overpriced. So I would actually say a lot of we're seeing settling of prices, not like drop in prices. We're seeing prices return to what they should normally be at. But some of the price markers that we're at, we're not seeing a drop from there. You're not gonna have your $1,000 card, hit $200. It might settle at like 6-7, but it's still going to be there unless there's like a reprint like we saw for Imperial Seal, where the Judge promo was $700-800, but then you had the reprint come and knock that down. So unless something like that happens in a main set, I don't see Magic 30 doing that to this.
So, speaking of COVID, what were the effects of the COVID lockdowns on game stores?
I saw some stores close down, buddy stores close down, and it's unfortunate. I saw stores that just, they got scared and made poor choices and started liquidating a lot of their inventory just to try and, get by. And this was like right before we had the financial help, right before we had PPPs to be able to help us get through it. It was scary. It was scary times for everybody. For us, as soon as that happened, we didn't expect this to go down this route, but I think around November or December, so like 4 months before the lockdown happened, I had wanted to digitize my entire inventory in the store. That had always been my goal, right? I wanted to be like Card Kingdom. It's one of the stores that we look up to. They're a great store. I love how they have everything accessible, and they have a great storefront, beautiful space. So I wanted to do the same. I wanted you to go in and punch, your cart into my website and come in and pick everything up. And it just wasn't viable back then because we were a small store. I would even say that we're still a small store at heart. But, we started in December, and, things started getting, scary, and, events started kind of like dwindling because, where everybody's worried about getting sick and masks started being a thing. And then right around closure time, the option was like, do we close down or are we gonna, liquidate stuff? And the choice just continued to the our route stayed the same. It's like, no, we need to just have everything on our website. I don't want to take the easy route of putting everything on TCG Player. I need to get my website up and going, and I feel like at least for us, that kind of changed our trajectory. Our sales pretty much doubled within a couple months just because our customer base had ease of access and they had, every item that was in our store was just on our website, and then we weren't paying the 10-15% that you would pay to eBay or to TCG Player, to be able to have the privilege of listing on their platform. You just went on our website, on our .com, and you punch in the cards, and you choose in-store chat, in-store pickup, and then you're coming in to pick it up. And at least for us, that definitely helped out. And then I know a lot of other stores that that did the same thing, that kind of had seen the same type of growth. I'm at a 4 or 5x growth since before COVID. So like for me, it was, I'm still in a new territory because we grew really quickly and we had to adjust to it. And a lot of my buddies' stores experienced the same type of growth where they're doing the same, they're doing the same as we are, where they were doing 5 figures before a month and now they're doing 6 figures a month. And it's a new position to be in, and it's kind of crazy. And it basically just went from not backing down and sticking on course, staying on course, and making sure that we did the thing that we wanted to happen, and it worked out for us. It could have not. We could have closed down just like other stores, and it wouldn't have been our fault. It's just something that happened, but we were just lucky. I think we just caught the waves on time.
All right. So moving on to a different topic, I wanted to talk about who you think the typical either Magic player is, or or player of like card games, tabletop games in general are. So I think that most people have an image in their mind of who that is. So for somebody who's at least vaguely in the like, geeky, nerdy game space, they have the idea that your typical game player is like a male who's aged 18 to 36 or something, either like a college student, high school to college student to middle-aged man. And then the not so charitable view outside of the game space is what you see in media, where it's a fat, overweight neckbeard who doesn't shower. So yeah. So, in your opinion, one, is there a typical player? And if so, what is the profile of that typical player?
Well, I'm definitely a big bearded overweight player for sure, but I do shower. No, the typical player. I guess, yeah. You don't really see a lot of kids here. At least for Magic. For Pokemon, you do a lot more children. But for the most part, Magic players tend to be over 18. Yeah, 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s. Not as many. I do have a lot of players that are around their, mid 40s, early 40s that still come, but it's primarily like 20, 30-year-olds that are coming to the store. They are primarily male, but we do have a lot more female players that are playing here than they were in the last 6 years that I've seen. It's growing a lot, and they're I wouldn't compare them to like what you normally see in movies now. Like it's your typical player. There isn't a typical player look anymore. I've seen accountants, then stereotypical surfer dudes coming in. I've seen metalheads coming in, goth kids with full-on Marilyn Manson makeup, football players, then your average nerdy dude with just with a comic book picture on their shirt, sure, but it's pretty diversified still. I mean, yeah, it is primarily male, and we do have more female players growing, and I hope to see more female players playing for sure. But it's still primarily male, and that I'm hoping changes slowly. And not saying I want less male players to play. I would like more people playing Magic in general.
So, in your opinion, why do you think it is that so few women play the game? Is it that Magic is a boys' club and it's unapproachable? Is it that Magic and card games just don't appeal to women as much? What is your opinion on that?
I think early on, I mean, any sort of hobby, like collectible hobby and nerdy hobby, had this whole like nerdy male stigma, right? Like it's a lot of the players back then weren't as welcome to like women players, female players. A lot of girls don't feel comfortable coming in because you did have a lot of awkward guys like 10, 20 years ago coming to play, and if a girl would come in, like she would instantly get hit on, and like that's uncomfortable for anybody coming in. You kind of want to just come play your game, and you don't want to be objectified, and that used to happen a lot because they just weren't used to like women coming, and now we have a lot more women playing card games in general. There's still that happening, just because there's not commonly a lot of women playing, but we do see a lot more women playing card games now, and the community in general is just being a lot more welcoming now than they were before as well too. We did see a lot more gatekeeping, not just towards women, just towards anybody that wasn't a white male, right? It was like, oh, how long have you been playing? Oh yeah, well, what do you play? Oh yeah, what format do you play? Oh, okay. Oh, you don't play this? And we everybody's heard that at some point in time, and it's that type of gatekeeping behavior that kept a lot of people from wanting to play this game. And now there's less of that because it's like I said, Arena made it a lot more accessible for everybody to play, and the older players are either adjusting or are just getting weeded out.
All right. So the last topic I wanted to talk about, you are one of the few premium stores, and I believe that there's extremely few premium stores. So I wanted to know what are the benefits of being a premium store, what it takes to become a premium store, and if that is worth it. So first of all, what are the benefits of being a premium store for Magic the Gathering?
What some of the quick benefits are that every month you do get secret layers. Any secret layer release, you get one copy of every secret layer that's released, even or up to two, depending on the secret layer. And I guess you do have to provide some sort of data because they do want to know how well their products are selling. So it's not like it is a give and take. To be a premium store, you do have to do a monthly report that goes, hey, how much of our sealed product have you sold, and how much of our Dungeons and Dragons have you sold? And just to nip anything, they don't care about our Pokemon sales, they don't care about our single sales, they don't ask us to give them information for any other card game. So they don't care, how much more sealed product they sell, Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or Digimon we sell at our store. They just want to know how well their products are selling at their store. And if you send it within the first week of the month, they double your secret layers, which is pretty cool because you're getting sometimes $1,000 worth of secret layers that you know make up for it, right? And the additional benefit is that you do show up as a premium store on their store locator. It's like a nice little badge to have. You get cool promotional material, like we got this awesome Magic the Gathering sign that's lit up that we have over our TO area. We have the option of having a second RCQ that most stores don't have, and our RCQs are double invite for this season, so it helps us get more players coming into our store. So those are some of the instant benefits of being premium in general.
Now, what does it take to become a premium store? So like obviously there are very few premium stores, so obviously there must be some sort of barrier to becoming one.
The barrier is pretty much just the beautification aspect of it. And as a store, they legally can't tell you what to do. They can't tell you, hey, you need to get these type of flooring in. They can't give you a list of stuff. They can only recommend to you what's premium or not. And it's really difficult, I guess, for some stores because it's a big financial hurdle. And you're not going to see the benefit to being a premium store right away. But this is the way I viewed it was this. They're not really giving me specifics to be a Magic store. They're just giving me they're trying to guide me to be a better version of myself, right? We spent, I think, 80 grand, 90 grand beautifying our store, but beautifying our store took us from making 3x to 5x. Like we're making, I don't want to give dollar amounts, but we're making enough that expense is nothing now. in the last year, right? It paid for itself because a lot of people that come into your store don't know that you're premium. They just walk in and you have this beautiful store, and they're just taken back by that. And I think that's the biggest benefit from it. It's not that you have this badge that says you're premium. They just kind of help you become a better version of yourself. And if that's at least the takeaway, that's a huge benefit in general. Like, we've had people come in and just tell us, this is the best store I've been at ever, or this is the nicest store. This is the nicest Magic store I've ever been to in Southern California. And those little things make me proud. And even it leads to consistent new customers coming in, returning customers, and that is the second benefit you have from being a premium store. It's not the badge that you're getting from being premium, but the fact that they elevated you to a new level, basically. And you have this whole new look to you that you didn't have before, because a lot of us know the average store that we've gone to, plain white walls, white ceilings on the tile, concrete flooring, mismatching chairs. Premium's not really, they're just, all they do is like, hey, have uniform matching chairs, have a uniform table, be presentable, make sure your trash is out, make sure you have nice flooring. I mean, all the stuff that they're really requiring you to do is not really like something that you shouldn't want to do just to be a better store in the first place. For the most part, most landlords are okay with you spending your own money to beautify your own space, because you're only making their property, increase in value. If you talk to, like, I talked to my landlord before getting to our location, and we told them, this is what we're gonna do, this is what we're planning on doing, this is a rough idea as to what we're gonna spend, and they gave us like 5 months of rent for free, which is great considering how much how much rent is for a much bigger location. And it helped lower down the cost to be able to do what we needed to do to that store, especially because we still were keeping a second store. Right, our first initial store had to remain open while the second store was getting renovated, and we did a complete overhaul. We tore down walls. We did all brand new electrical. We had new signage installed. We did the works. We spent a lot of money, and it paid it. It took a while to pay itself back, but the growth that you're gonna see from beautifying your store in general, right? If you make any sort of improvements to your store in general, you're gonna see more customers coming to your store just from being a better place. Nobody wants to go to, like, a rundown location. Like, sure, you're gonna have your diehards that have been going there for 5-6 years, but any business that doesn't reinvest into themselves is never gonna grow. And I feel like, being premium, sure, it's a big hurdle to get into, but the growth that you're gonna see is it's all positive. That's all I've seen from it. Sure, like, the benefits that I get from them isn't substantial. Like, getting secret layers isn't a lot. Getting the some fixtures here and there doesn't make up for how much you would spend renovating, but then your sales will justify the renovation, because you're a much better retail location than you ever were. I wish, you should put up some pictures of the old store, compared to how it's now, and it's night and day. And
I'll definitely do some before and after pictures.
oh yeah, and it's definitely night and day. It's definitely night and day, especially for, like, our player attendance as well, since it's a much more comfortable space to play at too. Just getting the chairs alone, double padded chairs, huge difference. It's the most comfortable play space that I've ever played at. That's the luxury that we had from doing it. We built the store that we wanted to play at, and now it's like I feel spoiled, because anytime I go to another store, I'm just like, it's not as good as our store.
So, on that note, one last question. So, what advice would you give to someone who wants to open their own game store? So, a brief comment before you answer. So, I've been to many stores where it felt like the store wasn't there to be a business, where it was more of a personal hobby space for the owner, where they were a gamer who played whatever game it was, Magic, Warhammer, whatever, and they wanted their own personal little hobby corner to play at. And they opened a store for that reason and didn't really run it as a business. And as a result, they didn't really have that great customer service. The play spaces were kind of messy. So, taking that into account, but also any other thoughts you have, what advice would you give to someone who wants to open their own game store?
So I could probably do like a couple hours just on this topic alone, but something simple would be like, don't quit your job when you open the store. When I opened my store, I worked my 9 to 5, but it was like 6 a.m. to like 4 p.m. And I went to the store from like 4:30 through 11 p.m. And I did this, 5 days a week. And then on the weekends, I was there from opening to closing pretty much every day. My wife was with me, or my fiance at the time, my girlfriend at the time. We weren't even engaged. My girlfriend at the time would join me and spend all day with me. We'd watch movies there. And there are those, store owners that, want to play. And the only thing I would tell them is like, you can play in as many events as you want, play all day, every day, but you're also going to have to be there at least 40, 50, 60 hours not playing games. So if you want to play, Friday Night Magic, that's cool. That doesn't count as a work day for you. You're going to spend more hours than you think that you should at your store, probably not making any money for yourself, just growing the business and sorting more cards than you've ever wanted to. There's just so much work that goes into it. You're never going to have enough money to start it comfortably. The dollar amount, if you had a dollar amount, let's say, I've seen stores start with maybe 10, 15 grand of like inventory and no money and do well. Because they were just constantly there working hard. I've seen stores start with $250,000 and close down within 7 months because you can't take away, money doesn't help bad decisions. You have to have a really strong business plan. You should know what your overhead's going to look like before you open the door, before you even start looking at places. And you can't say, oh boy, if I don't know how much my rent's going to cost. Yeah, you do. It's going to be about $2 a square foot. Just go with $2 a square foot.
You're talking specifically in California.
Yeah, California. For California, at least. You can figure out, minimum wage for one employee. You are working there, and then what your electricity? You need electricity. You need internet, electricity. If you're no gas, since you're not really running anything from there, your landlord should cover the water and trash, but make sure add 200 for 100 for water, 40 for trash, 150, $200 for internet, 200 to 500 for electricity, depending on whether it has AC or not. AC is great. It's super important. There's just a lot of these little things that you should come into and then figure out what your inventory value is. Don't have a rough estimation of like, oh, I have a modern deck and I'm going to put in my modern deck, my EDH deck. That's not enough. That's not enough in the beginning because you're one player. Another player could come in and just clean you out and then you're done. You should already be at least maybe moving stuff online, doing the online sales for a minute, trying to grow your inventory as much as you can. I've seen way too many nice dudes come in, open up a store and close down in a year or two, and it's just sad because I made a lot of friends that just did that and they just don't make it. And I had a buddy that's opening up a store right now too. I give him advice, and I'm always available to give advice, and I'm pretty transparent with it. It's just that it's a lot harder than you think. You're working a lot of hours where you're not getting paid, and you're really doing it for the love of the hobby, and eventually it will be super worth it. Like right now, it's definitely super worth it for us, but the first couple years it was hard. It made it to where we didn't know if we were gonna make it or not. Not just like a monthly thing, a weekly thing. Sometimes you don't know if you're gonna cover payroll or not, and it's not something that I would wish on anybody else. Having a career is probably probably a lot easier than like trying to open up a game store, unless you have just the inventory or just you've been ingrained in your community and you just know people that you can just start buying, picking up inventory from everybody, or you have good credit, you're able to just get a decent starting loan. But none of it matters if you don't have a good plan. You have to be ready, and sometimes your plan's never going to work as you want it, so you have to be prepared to just be flexible. Be like water. Basically, you open up a Magic store, and guess what? No one plays Magic in your area, right? Pokemon's huge. Well, cool, you're a Pokemon store now. Oh, but I want it to be a Magic store. Yeah, that's cool. You're a Pokemon store. You can carry Magic. Like that's what happened to me. Like I was making, like, I love Magic, but I was making dioramas for my Marvel Legends. And then now I'm not. Now I'm practicing Magic all the time, and I'm playing One Piece. You just have to be flexible, and sometimes the thing that you want to be the main thing at your store just isn't, right? 55% of my sales are Magic. So we are a Magic store. Luckily, I love Magic. We're also a Pokemon store, right? But you just have to be willing to be flexible, because you have to cater to whatever your community wants and needs in your area. And I think the wrong type of mentality is, and I get it, this may be your dream. Your dream has always been to open a card store. Your dream has always been to, run a place that you could draft every day. That's great. But the thing about opening up a card store is that at one point, it's no longer your store. My store is not my store. I could leave and it's going to continue to be run by my community. But it's going to be, it's its own thing now. And that's eventually what you want your store to be. You don't want it to be, oh, this is Grimm's store. No, this is Collector Legion. This is, Top the Keep, or whatever other store this is. Your store is just what it is. And it becomes its own thing after a while, where it's, I'm not saying, and it sucks if your dream is to open up a Magic store and it just, luckily Magic is the biggest card game, so you're not going to have that issue. But if your dream was to open up the biggest Flesh and Blood store and just nobody plays Flesh and Blood in your area and you're reluctantly selling Magic singles, then I'm sorry. I've seen that at many stores too. I've seen board game stores that reluctantly sell singles. And I've gone to one in Vegas. I've gone to play there and I'm asking for singles. They're like, nope, we can't sell you any singles before the start of an event. Why? We don't have staff. I only want 4 cards. Yeah, no. And they refuse to sell you singles. And I'm sure a lot, if you live in Nevada, you know what store I'm talking about. And they have a beautiful spot, and I can guarantee you that they make most of their money and they keep the doors open for Magic, but they don't treat it like that. And it's, and I'm sure the owner just loves their board game space, and it's great. And I love tabletop games too, but you have to acknowledge what's keeping the doors open and cater to those communities, right? Even though, at least at my end, tabletop doesn't make the most money, we treat everybody equally, but in the back end, what's keeping the doors open, and financially you make your decisions based on that. But it's a lot more analysis than you would think, and it's not a clubhouse either. Don't treat it like your clubhouse. It's a business at the end of the day. And if you want a clubhouse, then just run games at your garage, host a weekly event at your shop, or be the dude that has all the cards, right? But it takes a lot more work to run a successful card store, especially one that leaves a huge impact on other players and makes them want to continue coming back. It's not something easy, and it's not just work that you do once. It's continual work too. You're constantly working on it.
All right, well, that was great. So I've been through all of my questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up?
Let me think of everything that we talked about. The last thing I would like to say is, if you have a local game store that is doing right by you and is fair in their prices and remembers your name and greets you when you come in, take care of them. That's it. A lot of stores don't want to say, hey, help us out. Luckily, some stores are doing better than others, but if you have some spare cash and you can support your store, support them. Winter's tough. Christmas is harder. A lot of these store owners have families that that they take care of. They don't have other careers. They don't have a second job or anything else. So just take care of your local game store. They'll, that's where you hang out. That's where you've met a lot of your friends. So, take care of your place. That's it.
All right, so this has been a great conversation. Thank you very much for joining me, Grimm. Where can people find you, either you specifically or the store if they're looking?
So, real simple, Collector Legion. That's COLLECTOR, Legion, LEGION. So Collector Legion on Instagram, on Facebook, or collectorlegion.com. You can see, our events that we host. We're pretty active on Instagram as well. We post up winter pictures or any sales. You can follow us up on Facebook. And, and if you want to shop, check out our website.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Tommy.